So Apple has pretty dramatically changed the way iOS looks and feels over the past 2 years with iOS 7 and iOS 8. But with 2 new iPhones coming out next week and an iPad Pro coming out later this year, we're going to need some new software, and that's what we've got running on these guys. They're running iOS 9, and it's actually what Apple devices have really been in need of. Not a whole lot of new groundbreaking features this year, just a lot of extra polish. So let's take a closer look.
Now, if you have an iOS device, there's a really good chance you've already downloaded and installed iOS 9. And if that's the case, you might have noticed the overarching theme of the new update, which is a big focus on efficiency and thoughtfulness. Just look at Siri. She's better at understanding your natural language commands, and she's even gotten better at figuring out what you're doing at any given point in time. If you're reading an article in Safari, for example, and ask for a reminder for this, she'll figure out that this equals article and give you a link right back to it when you want it. She'll show you photos from specific years and locations too, but more importantly, she'll also offer up suggestions for apps you might want to use and people you might want to talk to at a particular point in time. In fairness, the app suggestions aren't always that great, but it shows that Apple's willing to try and meet you halfway and give you what you want when you need it, as opposed to making you look for it all the time. Those suggestions live in the updated Spotlight search interface, which Apple sort of wants to make your de facto quick launch system. Swipe to the right from the home screen and you'll find Spotlight, which you can also access by dragging down. But anyway, that's where your search bar, those suggestions, and local and new suggestions live too. Having all of this proactive, catered information in one place is actually pretty nice, but it will take some time for people to get used to using it as opposed to their tried and true iOS behaviors. You know, while we're talking about thoughtfulness, my favorite addition to iOS 9 is probably the littlest. It's a tiny context-sensitive back button that lives in the top left corner of your iDevice. Let's say you're in one app and you follow a link and voila, you're in a completely separate one. Instead of opening up the app switcher and jumping back into the other app card, you can just tap the back button and it'll take you one step back up your trail of digital breadcrumbs. On the flip side, the biggest visual change is going to be the completely revamped app switcher, which doesn't have app cards laying side by side, but rather sort of stacked on top of each other. It's a really sleek touch, and it looks a lot better than the switcher we got in iOS 8, but it doesn't really work that much better. Oh, and if you're one of those super productive road warrior types, you'll like what Apple's done with Notes and Maps. Gone are the days where you just had to type your notes out. You can now doodle or scribble on screen, and also add photos and ordered list elements to your notes, which is great if you're the kind of person who loves to check things off when you finish something. And if you live in supported cities, Apple Maps now finally gives you transit directions, which is especially useful for me getting to my New York office. I don't know that I'll give up Google Maps completely, but Apple Maps is finally getting to the point where I'd consider it. You can feed it your favorite publications and topics right out of the gate, and over time it'll try and figure out the sort of news you like and surface it to you more easily. Thing is, I've been dutifully liking news stories to try and give it a sense of what I want to read, and the suggestions in the For You section generally kind of suck. As a straight up news reading tool, it works fine, but it does feel like the one thing on iOS 9 that really isn't living up to its potential. Now, there are going to be some trade-offs depending on the device that you have. iPhones get low power mode, but iPads get a lot of new stuff. Itching to multitask? If you have a supported iPad, Slide Over lets you open a drawer of supported apps that you can have sitting next to your main application, so you can have 2 windows going at the same time. Thing is, you can't actually use both apps at the same time. If you want to do that, you'll have to have either an iPad Air 2 or an iPad Mini 4 and use what's called Slide View, which lets you pull the dividing line over so both apps take up a full 50% of the screen and you can interact with both at the same time. It's a thoughtful touch, and I could see it working really well on the iPad Pro's enormous screen, but on a regular iPad Air or iPad Mini, I didn't find many reasons to use it. Slide Over was generally more than enough. Now, there are still plenty of moving parts that we haven't gotten a chance to discuss, so you'll want to read our full review for that deep dive. But these core features and all of the little design changes that Apple has made to iOS 9 make it feel much more efficient, much more thoughtful, and much more ready for the future than iOS 8 ever was. Is this the most revolutionary version of iOS we've ever seen? No. What it is a nicely polished foundation for Apple to build off of in the months and the years to come.